Hello and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's Common Ground. I'm Malvika Jolly, Special Projects Associate here at the Rail, and today I'm thrilled to be welcoming Sarah Riggs, Safaa Fathy, and Alisha Mascarenhas from Tamaas, an intercultural organization of arts, letters, and translation, and so much more, for the 6th installment of Publishing in Transit. We're all joined here today by literary critic and curator of this series, Cole Swensen. A few quick notes before we get started. First, here at the Rail, we're celebrating our 21st anniversary. It's a big year for us, and we're celebrating by working on our first ever endowment campaign, which will ensure the continuity of the print edition of the Rail, alongside public programming and other kinds of cross-pollinations in the arts, humanities, and sciences for generations to come. Secondly, here in New York, we're on Lenape, the unceded land and waters of the Wapinger, Canarsie, Munsee, and Lenni Lenape people of the Delaware Nation and the Shinnecock Indian Nation. Part and parcel of this acknowledgement is the continued acknowledgement that Black lives matter, and that when it comes to our liberation, our histories never unfold in isolation. And in that spirit, we encourage you to check out the chat, where I'll drop some more links and info. But now it's my honor to welcome our wonderful guests. Writer and artist Sarah Riggs was born in New York, where she's now based after over a decade in Paris and elsewhere. Before directing 6 Lives, a Cinepoem, she produced the Tangier 8 at the Cinémathèque de Tanger in Morocco. She's the author of 7 books of poetry in English, the book of essays Word Sightings, Poetry and Visual Media in Stevens, Bishop, and O'Hara, and has translated 6 books of contemporary French poetry, including Etel Adnan's Time. She's the director of the international arts organization Tamaas, which is the wonderful occasion for our conversation today, where she focuses on earth, arts, justice, film, and their annual poetry translation seminar. She's joined by poet, filmmaker, and essayist Safaa Fathy, who was born in Egypt and obtained her PhD from the Sorbonne in Paris in '93. From 2010 to 2016, she was a director of program at the International College of Philosophy in Paris. She wrote Ordalie Intérieure with an introduction by Jacques Derrida, with whom she also wrote Tourner les mots. Her most recent poetry books are Revolution Goes Through the Walls and A Name to the Sea. And she has a wide variety of plays, essays, and films that we're so excited to talk about today. She's joined as well by poet, teacher, and literary translator Alisha Mascarenhas, who is most recently the author of Contagion Fields, published with the Belladonna 2021 chaplet series. She's the co-editor of Read, a journal of intertranslation at Tamaas, and lives in Brooklyn, New York. And finally, keeping them all in conversation and in questions, we have poet Cole Swensen. Cole is the author of 17 volumes of poetry, 1 collection of critical essays, Noise That Stays Noise, and a book of hybrid poem essays titled Art in Time, which came out with Nightboat fairly recently. A former Guggenheim Fellow, she's been a finalist for the National Book Award. She's received the Iowa Poetry Prize and the National Poetry Series Prize, among many others. She's translated over 20 volumes of poetry, prose, and art criticism from the French, and here she is to translate the secrets of the publishing industry for us all. Cole, thank you for joining us, and take it away. Oh, and I'll ask you to unmute your microphone.
May as well unmute while we're at it. Thank you, Malvika, and thanks to everyone at the Brooklyn Rail, to Micah and to Nick and to Fong Bui and everyone who makes it happen. And thanks to everyone who's come today to converse. It might be great to sort of crack the ice and get everybody's voice in the room. So perhaps we'll just start by talking about what's around us. We're scattered all over a couple of continents in this case. Let's start with Safaa. Where are you? What are you seeing out your window?
Well, just now it is dark, and I'm in my study, as you see, with all the files behind there, and it's dark because in Paris, so dark Paris.
Great, great. And how about you, Sarah and Alisha? I know you're seeing each other, but what else is around?
Well, we've had a kind of beautiful string of bright light during the day, and then of course it's darker earlier in the evening, so we're just soaking it up. Alisha crossed the park to get here, so
great, nice. And Michael, where are you?
I'm in Charlottesville, Virginia, and so it is 12 p.m. So it's kind of, I'm currently in a room, like a room for like in an academic building, but I don't have any windows. So it feels very sterile, but outside is kind of a gloomy, rainy day.
Right. Good. Well, we in New England are blessed with a great blue sky day, and I'm looking out at sun, so I'm feeling happy about that. And let's move into some poetry. And let's start with Alisha, and here's some of your work.
So I'm going to read a little bit from some newer work that's still coming together, some poetry about risk. And a lot of this work comes through my reading of a book called In Praise of Risk by philosopher, psychoanalyst, Anne Dufour-Montel. So yeah, I'll just read from, I guess, 3 different sections of that work in progress. So the first is from At the Risk of Beauty. And it starts with a little clip from the text. Far from being the subject of beauty, she who experiences it, in some sense, becomes its thing. An effective resonance that undoes any idea of belonging or subjectivity. The pleasure dread of the Venusian principle, the nectar of attraction being called forth, being touched. Turning a corner toward the perfect light, sweet bloom, unplanned for occurrence of pleasure. It's to risk being affected, being touched, losing touch, holding too tight. Perception itself is understanding. Recover the senses to see beauty in what you've been trained to perceive as repulsive. Preference is not absolute. Examination is first attention. How quick to decide attraction, be suspended outside any material contingency. And the second is both in response to the risk of bedazzlement and also through reading a text called Bewilderment by Fanny Howe. In the too much of light or of truth, there resides the possibility of permanent total blindness, but there too is the apparition of joy. Weeping breaks the edge of September, tall grasses moved by the wind in the yard of the blue house. Roses, hard fruit ripen on the tree and the dog rests on the tiles. She's gazing out the window. Floods of feeling come and go, this madness of waking each day in confusion. Time cruelly passing, minutes, hours, weeks, storms, visitors. Light slants away from you. Bewilderment is a way of entering the day as much as the work. You shut your eyes against the day, but there is no retreat. This is a despair to live with, like the day I took the train to meet you the whole way wanting to die. It's so ordinary. You waited for me under the fountain outside the theater, and we sat in the cool, dark room and walked through the park, and the moon rose over the city. We're rushing backwards and forwards within an irreconcilable set of imperatives. Delusion is a second order of truth. The crush of attraction, going in search of the unnameable. I yearn to merge with the night in the 5th house. What's revealed in the flash outside the familiar, the truth of a feeling, sensation of insight. Being willing to see without latching to a steady conclusion. Kissing her, then you, then her, then you. Flashes of bewilderment,
the euphoric wave of total lucidity, the instant of closing the eyes just after, having seen no way of turning back. The shadow rides close to the figure. It's about the underside, but not only, the image behind the image. Life continues. What's wrong comes underneath what's right. And then the third and last piece I'll read is about laughter and dreaming. The effraction of the laugh that displaces the self, this held together patterning of neurotic repetition. Heavily the rain falls. The violence of a laugh that cuts through a delicate experience. Innocent entry into complicity on the basis of being seized. Threshold of release. A surrender that's both dangerous and devastating. If death is the flash exit from life, the impasse of innocence is subject to an elusive form of impact. The death drive points to the taboo, quite close to submission without solemnity. It's chosen. Cold weather comes on and laughter opens up, close to submission. The imaginary. Meeting outside the church with the others to loosen the trap. Another way out. To lighten the load and quicken the fire. Wind rushes in and you're naked under your clothes like this is some kind of joke. Flutter your thinking to let loose the tremble. Humility of acceptance and praise for the ignorance of the present. I want so much to be alive. Do you do little tricks for future delight? For eventual disruption of the tightening spiral? I return daily to what's at hand. I'm so emotional. Silent laughter that ripples inside, subtle vibrations so close to weeping. Get to work. I'll drop off there to be continued, and I'll pass it over to Safaa. Thanks.
Safaa, you should be able to
yeah,
transfer
I say thank you, Alisha. It's been beautiful and very difficult to pick up after you. But I'm gonna read something from a very old book, but it became a new book because it's been translated into English, and Paminar Press proposed to publish it. And Ghazal Musaddaq is here, the director of Paminar Press, so just a gesture towards her too. Its name is called Al-Hashish. And Al-Hashish is an Arabic word, plural of Al-Hashisha, that means dry grass. Also the unborn child petrified in its mother's womb, and the well-known drug, as we all know. It has many names, many types of hashish. There are many types of hashish. So hashish of the needle, a plant. Open the book 3 times at random. The last time, 6 times. The answer traces the passage that closes the pages, opens the book, the return of a cut against another passage in the rock. That night, buried within me. In the early morning of things, I have the gestures of the ordeal. A woman prowls in weight and oblivion. Ocean trenches, where detaches itself the red silhouette of yesterday, without image, stretched out in the shade of the roses. Hypnosis against a blue curtain, bending, seeding of destiny. Then let go, the cord in reverse, sky against earth, eyelashes stick, emergence, trickling, the return liquid. in the antechamber of the Condessa. The night boils, coagulates, the outstretched arms that see autumn. No, lashes stick to one eye and the other weeps white. However, she was covered on a green ground. The black flowed needlewards, and the towel remained mute. In her fury, she shut the day, and madness lived on a steering wheel. Cross the lines. You make yourself a road, the girl a strand of hair, and a hot coffee, a train. Go by my street again. Behind, in front, so many lanes and nothing. We won't pass together. Alone in the meantime, leave a coat, a shirt, a tie. The soles of the feet regrow upright. Hashisha of the dragon, rare plant. Alone, you close your door after the night, after the winds that flow over the banks, even on marble, in a giant heart where I lay my pirated days. Merano, don't you see the hereafter? Look at the cities, Toledo, Lisbon, Coimbra, Algiers, Cairo. Or do you sojourn in the belly of an Easter pomegranate next to a cat sparkling in a courtyard? Where did you travel? At the third sun rises the brazenness. The fury in Marie Curie's inside is the name of the hunger, of a salt tree, of a fulminating desert, of the drool of time. And convent brings you the bread needed in the night that still drags the whiteness to the corridors, to the starred floor. Dive. The mirror restrains me on the edge of the faint face. When will these tears release you from the earth? Viviendo. In the antechamber of the Condessa, wash with stone, with rose water, the first name of before. Your number is a flower that closes the windows, the streets, and the journey on foot. Lock was golden, silvery, serpentine. My mother gave me to the convent. Caminando, 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 caminando. The religion of fruit, the fruit, things, covered flesh, closed over a sap, foreign. It is genetic. A cell reigns, a cell weeps, and a genome plays the evil Jenny. Thank you. I just forgot to say that these poems as well are part of a film, which is in the Tamaas website called Hidden Valley.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Great
you.
Great to get started with the actual work and the voices. And now let's shift a little bit. And I'd like to start our conversation by asking you, Sarah, to tell us about the name Tamaas and how it connects and intersects with some of the unique qualities of your arts organization.
Yes, Tamaas is a word that has no analog in English, which makes it special. And it means a contact or a touch, as in, the fingers on a musical instrument. And I think we have been looking from the beginning for an engagement with differences across cultures and across genres. That is very, at a kind of at an emotive level, and we aren't answering to a particular country or frontier. Although we have done a lot of work in the kind of triangle of Morocco, France, and the US, but we've also worked with Lebanese artists and Japanese and many cultures.
Great. And Alisha, I know that you're very involved in kind of the administrative and organizing, and I wondered how you see that multiculturalism showing up in the work that you're doing with Tamaas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, a lot of my sort of role in Tamaas feels kind of like an extension of that touch, because a lot of what I'm doing is the work of an editor, which to me is a very relational job or like position to be in. And I think I've found over the years that it's the relationships in Tamaas that make it what it is, which I think in large part has to do with like what I learn a lot from Sarah's approach to working with people, which is really seeing their humanity, so that when we're, even if we're just kind of involved in correspondence with different artists or poets who are contributing work to Tamaas, they're always I always have seen Sarah meet them first as people, and to understand them as artists in the sort of totality of their lives. And I think to me, that's what is meaningful about doing this kind of work, that is creating connection across race or national lines in particular, because they're real, like in the sense that they're relationships between people, not just their identities or the kind of ideas about their work, or even like the topics of their work. It's like the people come first and then the work kind of moves through those relationships. So especially with editing, I can see that, because it's like the medium is the work, but the relationship is really how it's traveling. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that networked web. And I know that Safaa, you felt that too as a participant in a number of projects with Tamaas film and translation. Can we hear something from your perspective about that?
Yes, I agree with Alisha, absolutely, because it has been an adventure of not just like, it's collaboration, of course, and literary work, but also it has been a place very hospitable for friendship and forming friendships and collaborating also with people in a friendly basis, like, with people becoming friends. I think, that Cole too. All of us had experiences of friendship. It's an important intrinsic part of the adventure of Tamaas. It's like, to create friends, communities of friends around the projects, around the poem, around the film, around the dance, around the word, or the literary gesture or artistic gesture. It has been like that. And I think all of us who ever collaborated with Tamaas know that we have home there somewhere. It's a kind of, it's a hospital home. It's a place where you can find, you're welcome. You're most welcome. And when you're most welcome, it's like you and Sarah too, Cole, when you did the workshop in the Red Hall in Paris. It was wonderful, to be able to do it in such a, I don't know, very laid back, relaxed atmosphere, and without stress, without anything, produce, things, and produce relationships and literary relationships, and and in the time produced books as well. I think many books appeared from this adventure too. So it has been, yeah, it has been, I think there's a kind of parallel universe in which, it accompanies, many of my years.
That notion of Tamaas as being a home, I think, is really central to the organization as I know it, and a very porous home where people come and go and sort of liberally flow through. I was thinking of another kind of home that Tamaas has, and that's the website, which I know you've been doing a lot of work on lately. And I thought that might be a great way to show a bit of the map of the organization with its complexities. And I know that Malvika has it there for us to look at. Thank you, Malvika. So as you can see, French, Arabic, and English are kind of balancing there, overlapping. I think that's an important element that we see. It's not just that they're side by side, but they actually overlap. Are you, it looks like you're poised to look at footprint 0, Malvika. Let's take a look at that. And Sarah, would you like to talk, or Alisha, talk a little bit about this project and what its scope is?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, why don't you start?
Yeah. Well, I think, in the midst of the translation seminars, we had some poets coming from overseas to Paris, and there were fires and floods, and we sort of realized like we need to make a project out of these socio-environmental issues of the Anthropocene. So here you can see a Moroccan artist named Rita Alaoui, who joined about 6 other artists for a show at l'usine, which means the factory, in Casablanca. And so she did miniature landscapes.
Great. That sort of sense of the bouquet, or the forest as a bouquet, or miniature forest as bouquet is really interesting. And there were a number of other projects related to this, weren't there? Maybe we could glance at a couple others too. Oh, that's great. Yeah, interesting.
Not to cut in, but this is something that I've found so intriguing going through the website, that you really have to click on each of the images to make them kind of appear. And I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, one thing that's particular about this website is that it was designed to be solar powered. And so for me, this was the first time that I had worked online in such a way that considers the sort of materiality and the material impact of a digital space on our living environment. And it's still something that we're all learning a lot about. But when we were working with Raoul Audouin, who designed the website, he helped us to understand that something like an image takes up a lot of energy, which has a literal material impact on the kinds of resources that are needed to produce that image. And so by one gesture that we've incorporated into the website is the necessity of clicking on an image, so that you're actually, as a user or as a person who's visiting the website, having to choose the energy that's taken for each piece that you view on the site, as opposed to having everything kind of downloaded all at once every time you open up a page. So in the places where there are images, you just have to click on it, and then it draws it up. And then also over time, as we were developing it, because of the sort of many different valences that Tamaas works through, there's also film and we started a podcast last year. And so we also had to kind of contend with what those different mediums demand on a website, and ended up making decisions around that in terms of just like hybridity, I guess would be the best way to put it, so that where there are films, you know, those to view those films, you have to actually exit the website and then it goes to another site that's not solar powered. So yeah, just to say that we sort of through the process of developing the site had to kind of
You could go to Halil Nemowi in the right lower corner.
Mm.
He traveled around his native Morocco and photographed for us. So we take very literally this idea of footprint zero. So the artists who were in the New York area stayed in New York, and we did an event at NYU. And the artists in Morocco stayed in Morocco. And so this is what you're viewing is the Moroccan section of Footprint Zero.
And then I think at the bottom of each page, there's a little bit of a word from the artist. Maybe this one might just actually just have a bio, but often the different artists have some text along with their visual work as well. Maybe that's not the case for this one.
And then we might go to the future, which is underneath Footprint Zero.
So because Tamaas works in so many different ways, we've set up the website so that, and we've kind of chosen these different sort of categories. So these two projects that we're looking at right now are under planet and have to do with the sort of earth arts justice side of Tamaas, and projects that are in response to the climate crisis and in response to our environment. Do you want to talk about this moment, this occasion?
Yeah. Well, Tamaas has been collaborating with dancers in context with text and poetry. So this was one such occasion that was Clorinda McClough, a dancer, choreographer, social activist. She was looking at the rising water levels. And so we were enacting physically the impact of human influence on water. With Gianna Park.
It's got such great dynamism to it.
And then we could go to films. If we go to Outrider, we're about halfway through producing a film on the poet and performer Anne Waldman. So if you scroll down, you'll see some stills. You can at a later point watch the trailer. And on December 10th, you're all invited to tune in. We'll be screening an excerpt of the film and having some artists speak to the film as we raise the funds for the final push. You can see Amiri Baraka, Anne Waldman. Here she is with Pat Steer, the visual artist, Ha-Young Kim, the cellist. And this is a photo from Morocco. Anne came with Tamaas to Morocco, and we did performances and worked with the girls' dormitory that Tamaas has been involved with over the years. And this is Anne at an Extinction Rebellion event. again, you know, we have a strong socio-environmental impulse. So her engagement with those communities was one of the reasons that we decided to make a film on her. And Alistair Julian is the director and cinematographer. I believe she's present with us today. And then we could go and look at.
Can I just add one more thing
Sure.
to that? Just something that's occurring to me as we're looking at Anne's work is just sort of coming back to the aspect of relationships and friendships through Tamaas. I'm just thinking of how like Anne has, as an individual, appeared at different moments and had different, has worked with Tamaas in so many different ways. And so like she was there in Morocco at a project there with the school, with the girls. And then there's this film being made. And then Anne also participated in the translation seminar last year. And it's just, I guess I wanted to bring it up because I think it speaks to kind of how artists who work in different ways or who have different kind of elements to their practice have been able to find ways of having a home in Tamaas that allows those different expressions to come forth rather than just being a poet or just being a filmmaker.
This is Mount Tremper. That was Soretta Morgan. And here we worked with some dancers who are part of Bushra Uzigan's dance troupe in Marrakesh. So this was in Morocco. So there were a selection of 6 or so artists who came through. And this is a version of the same group in Mount Tremper in upstate New York, where we went. And this is a dance poetry workshop residency. Yeah. Aya Nabi from Egypt has collaborated in the translation seminar, as well as worked in Casablanca and New York. You know, she's made a big impression on us, and we've really appreciated collaborating with her.
Are there any stills or excerpts from Safaa's or your films in the film thing? Can we see some of your work there?
The water is Safaa's work there.
Great.
So last year we organized a retrospective of Safaa's film. She's been a very prolific filmmaker in addition to being a poet.
Safaa, do you want to describe a bit and that experience?
Well, actually, yeah, I think the films themselves.
No, but you know, like we in 2019, I was supposed to be coming to US for all sorts of things, readings or collaboration with Tamaas, or the whole thing was organized by Tamaas. But you know, I had some other relationships somewhere, and there was supposed to be, you know, reading here and there and doing some lectures or seminars in New York. And what happened is, like, you know, as we all know, that that the epidemic broke up, and then I couldn't travel. So Sarah and Tamaas had organized that there is a retrospective of my films, which I introduced like by film-wise, by making small videos, if you want. And they had been shown online, as well as there was also, you know, a few talks which were organized also by Tamaas, like online talks as well. And after we finished, I can't remember the name of the organization which hosted the films in the first place, but then
Maisel.
I decided, I didn't decide. It seems absolutely natural that the films will, if Sarah was, if Tamaas wanted to to give them hospitality, then they should be on the Tamaas website, and Sarah give them the hospitality. So they are there instead of being just on YouTube or wherever. So they are there on Tamaas website, and where you could, you know, watch all sorts of very different films. Some of them, this is, for example, the images we're seeing is from an island next to the shore of Yemen and the Indian Ocean called Socotra. And I went there and camped and filmed for quite a while. And it was a very strange place because it's like, you know, contrary to the dystopia in which we live just now, there is some kind of utopia there. It's like, you know, there is no violence, no theft, it's auto-regulated, there is no cars, you just walk or you take a camel to go somewhere. So we crossed the island from north to south on foot, and sometimes on a camel because I couldn't walk at one moment. And so we made this film, and I was like I always do, I put some black and white Super 8 images, and then, you know, that was like at the beginning of HD digital cameras. This 2006 was made. So that, you know, finally the whole, quite a big deal of us, of these films, you know, are being, you know, housed in the Tamaas website. There is also the film I was talking about, out of which it's I do some kind of cine films, poetry films, and there is one, I think, on Tamaas website, and it's called Hidden Valley. So I read some extracts from Hashish, which, yeah, that one, Hidden Valley, and so this was filmed in California, by the way, in the Joshua Tree Desert. So I took some extracts from the book and put them onto these images. There are images from the US, there are images from Egypt, there are images from everywhere. Spain, can't remember where else, maybe Yemen too, Socotra, you know, all sorts of images. This is Spain, for example, the Mediterranean. There are many seas in it. So this is the Mediterranean. Sometimes there is the Indian Ocean or the Pacific or whatever.
I wonder, would we have a little bit of time to perhaps watch a few minutes of this film? Does that feel all right to everyone?
Sounds like a great idea.
Okay, just like a minute or two. Give me a second.
Lettre quémande, disparue, en des heures de fait froid. Objet, Ray, Jenny, machine à filer le coton. Date, lundi 4 août 2003, 19h45. Conversation. Jenny, chère fileuse de coton. Le temps est impardonnable. Rendez-moi ma vie que je sois infidèle. Elle est sans douleur. Elle est dans le point mort. Elle est dans la retraite jusqu'au non-point. Elle a perdu son ombre. C'est impardonnable. Quant au montage, Eden Valley, 6 juin, il prend son temps. Il est bon d'apporter le chimérique à la matière brute et l'ajuster ensuite à la coupure. Commencer par le trop et les multiples, comme la jeunesse, et puis se retirer vers la juste économie de vieux.
Wonderful to actually get to see some of the film in motion, as well as the stills. So where is Tamaas going next? Can you speak about which projects you're focusing on at the moment, and how the balance of all of these various things that you do gets maintained?
Yeah, well, with Cole Swensen, we have curated a translation workshop every summer for a week. And we then publish the results as a journal or book. And in the last 8 or so years, we've had a focus on Arab poets, and we're going to be coming out with an anthology of contemporary Arab poets who've translated each other, or, you know, it'll be an English, French, Arabic trilingual edition with Litmus Press. So that's one thing that we're working on. And do you want to speak to?
Oh, I was just going to say it's one thing and it's two things, in the sense that the seminar happens every year, and there is a journal that we publish that is the result of the work that's translated during that week. And so that's the Read Journal of Intertranslation. And so the next one will be coming, the last year's, no, 2019's seminar is on the website. 2020's will be coming out with Litmus Press. And then the Arab Poets Anthology is sort of apart from that, but also coming out of the translation seminar, but focusing more specifically on Arab poets. And that's going to be a larger collection and imprint with Litmus in the next, maybe end of 2022, you know.
Yeah, and there, we were speaking the other day with Malvika about the various encounters and relationships that have come out of those seminars. So for instance, this last year, Sarah El-Kamel, and who's from Egypt and is pursuing an MFA at NYU, beautiful poet, met Mona Karim, who has participated a couple of years running. And Mona then asked Sarah to help her translate her work for a press in England, from Arabic into English. So these encounters that occur are wonderful. And we've had Safaa Fathy first met Pierre Joris through the seminar. Pierre came out with her book, Revolution Goes Through the Walls, about the revolution, which Safaa also filmed. So we have the film of that. So there's so many different aspects of encounter and overlap, as you can see, just between the different art forms.
I'm wondering what the opening up of the world again, now that we seem to be able to do more things in person, how that's affecting your plans. And particularly I'm thinking about your commitment to zeroing out the footprint in terms of travel as well. So, and Safaa, you might want to speak to this too. How do you see the technology and in-personness operating in the coming years?
Well, one thing that we're going to be trying out is trying the translation seminar in Casablanca, since I'm there once a year with Omar Barada, who's the co-founder of Tamaas. And we're going to be perhaps collaborating with an American center, in which case we would be working with a number of Moroccan poets with Arabic and French in person. So going back to in person. So we've had 2 years of online translation seminar. So we'll see how that evolves.
And that's been kind of a process that we've been going, or been kind of trying to think through over the last few years, even pre-pandemic and Zoom world. We were already starting to think about how to, just different creative ways to be able to hold these kinds of gatherings together, whether that be fully remote or having satellite encounters where for this last year, for example, the seminar was online, but we had some people here in New York who could meet together. And then there were some people in Cairo, I think, and some people in Morocco. So that was sort of an instance of sort of combining the in-person and the online. And so I think something that's exciting to me, I guess, is just how we're kind of learning and adapting and allowing the shape of Tamaas to change over time.
Yeah, that flexibility seems crucial. Did you want to add something there, Sarah?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Safaa what her, to compare the different experiences. Working at one point, she worked with Omar Barada. At one point, she worked with Pierre Joris, and then more recently, Mona Karim. If you could speak to your experiences across different years and the kind of subtleties of those particular encounters.
Each time was very, very different. The year I worked with Omar, it was just like I was getting to know you both, Sarah and Omar. And it was a year 2006, and it's also where it falls, all these seminars within my time space, And that was a year where it was one of the harshest years in my life, around this area, around this time. And the seminar was for me, it was at that time, was nice weather. It was in Red Hall. I was working with Omar. I just met you, Sarah. It was a real, it soothed me. It's it was much beyond the translation itself. It was something which had, helped me survive, if you want. And that was that's the very beginning. Then there was the moments where I worked with Pierre Joris, where there was the literary discovery of the person and his oeuvre, and we collaborated. I translated his book called Meditations on Stations of Mansour al-Hallaj, which is about to come out in Cairo just now, and he, with my help, translated The Revolution Goes Through Walls, which came out a few years ago in the US. That was and he became a friend, Also, when I worked there, then there was the literary discovery and also the friendship with Ghazal Musaddaq. And when we worked with Sarah and Ghazal on Ghazal's project on talismans, which also we carried on a year later with Anne Waldman and Elizabeth Taylor, and also Sarah and Ghazal. So that was 1 year we did that. So that was the seed for some further collaboration with this group of wonderful poets, women poets. Then there was the year, I think we did some collaboration with Marilyn and Rashida.
Marilyn Hacker.
Marilyn Hacker and Rashida Madani. And that was also another experience we started doing things which were really kind of crazy, because Marilyn was writing poems in Arabic, and I was writing poems in English, and Rashida did the same, and it was just like, you know, playing with languages and poems and so on. And Sarah added something to it too. So it was like, yeah, it was like every time was different, and every time, you know, there was a seed for some further work, or some, or at least some kind of, let us say, a wonderful memory, something to remember, which was like always that memory, which was how to say, structured, you know, many of our experience with the workshop. As for being in, of course, I prefer being in person. I mean, you know, you know, it's also an illusion to think that traveling is more polluting than online. I just read an article in Monde Diplomatique, a study, which actually the huge pollution is happening through virtual things, because it's terrifying what's going on with the machines and the virtuality, and all these machines has to be cooled down, and the reproduction of these machines, and the amount of energy it consumes, and it's really, really terrifying. So and I've been always as a person, this is really personal, it's like I'm always for the exchange and the presence and the exchange between artists and writers. I am not for massive tourism, but I am for the exchange between artists and writers in person. So, you know, within limit, and within, of course, in reasonable limit, because there was some kind of excessive exaggeration years past, because, you know, just you go for 2 days somewhere to do a reading and come back, you know, that was not good. But, you know, the extensive collaboration, which has a meaning and a grounding, yeah, it's important to do. So this is, well, yeah, I've been one of these people who had been very lucky to be in a seminar for so many times, and so I consider myself very lucky with it. And every time was, you know, always give me something different. While there is a continuity, of course, of the exchange, and the last 2 years when with the meetings, the daily meetings we used to do, I found there was something which was really enriching to exchange with all the translators, which we didn't do in person. We only just went, but usually in person we stayed, like, you know, the whole day together, and we had lunch together, and then we went home. But you know, online we didn't see each other. But the hour or whatever we spent, or more, I can't remember how much time was it, an hour or an hour and a half, we spent together, you know, exchanging and trying to abstract some ideas about our work and the process of translation we've been indulged in or immersed in. Was I find it was very, very good, very enriching, very yeah, very it helped a lot to understand all the processes and the ways of thinking, and, you know, as multiple as it can be.
Part of our flexibility allows us to explore in different places issues which are local to those places. So, for instance, in France, Safaa participated in a Tamaas reading at the Institut du Monde Arabe, where there were 4 Arab, 4 American, English, and 4 French poets, women poets reading. And it's very unusual. It's very hard in France to talk about race. You're not trained to be able to mention that. It's kind of a taboo word. So we're sort of working on that. We're possibly going to work with Françoise Vergès, who's a leading thinker, feminist, who really deals with issues of race in her writings, and she's a wonderful speaker, originally from an activist from Reunion Island. So that's one of the directions that we're looking at, because we do have this intimate and long relationship with France and so many relationships there.
I wonder if we could hear something from Omar as co-founder, your experiences and perspectives.
How's your incognito? What are you doing, Cole?
Sorry about that. I put you right on the spot.
Sure. I mean, I'm happy to say something. It's been an incredible adventure. I mean, I'm co-founder, but to me, I mean, all the credit for Tamaas goes to Sarah and all the people who have been working on the different projects. And I'm saying this also because as someone who has worked a lot within art institutions and institutions in general of culture, art, and education, both in France and here in the US, I'm always looking with kind of admiration and sometimes disbelief at the way in which when Sarah thinks up a project, it is kind of from the get-go free from the usual formats and strictures that we are bound by within institutions, and this way of leading with humanity and friendship rather than leading by a format or an outcome. And so a lot of the projects come from some urgency and a trust in the relational power of friendship, and a trust in the fact that something will be built through time. And so it's really interesting because for a project like the translation seminar that, you know, it wasn't started with the objective or with the goal of publishing things necessarily. And the idea is that poets are paired, and each pair is two people translating each other. But what's happened, and it's been alluded to several times today, is that so many books, entire books, have come out of that process just through the fact of two people having met during that week in Paris or even online, and then continued working together. That kind of matchmaking worked out, and these books and relations over the years have come out of it, and many more than would have come out if that had been the goal from the beginning, in a way. So cheers to that.
Thank you. That's great to have that perspective. So maybe time to move towards some questions from the rest of you here. What comes to mind? What would you like to find out or probe further? And maybe at this point, I'll turn it over to Micah, who usually handles the Q&A.
So I think Micah and I will share the Q&A today, but in fact, our first question is Micah herself. So handing the mic over to you. We'll give her a moment.
Hi, sorry, I had to relocate really, really quickly. But yeah, thank you again to everyone who has been able to talk with us today. It's been really insightful and really interesting to hear about Tamaas. And my question is more generally, like, I'm curious about the evolution of Tamaas and how has its mission or purpose kind of evolved over the last like 17 years, especially thinking about the acceleration of ecological issues and maybe more generally how the writing landscape has like shifted and just how how this has kind of evolved into what it is now from its beginning in 2004.
Well, one of the things that we've explored as an arts organization is working with specialists who are not necessarily in the arts. We started a podcast series in 2020 to address some of these issues of the acceleration of ecological and social stress. And we worked, for instance, with a politician, Jabari Brisport. So that was really very illuminating. And we were asking him about his personal evolution, his parents, his grandparents, their impact on his choices. And then our most recent podcast, which is about to come out, which Alisha and I did in Harlem with E.J. McAdams, who's worked for various environmental groups over the years and is also a poet, and Latasha
And Nevada Diggs.
Latasha and Nevada Diggs, who is a poet and performer and has lived her whole life in Harlem. And she was looking for a way during the pandemic to feel more grounded in the community around her. And she started feeding the birds. She watched other people in the park feed birds. And it's amazing to watch EJ and Natasha together. They helped save a warbler together, but their very different approach to birding through binoculars versus watching birds in the hand and what they do for each other. A robin in particular, moving pecans for fellow robins who would follow after him, and developing that kind of trust relationship. But we sort of entered the animal kingdom as if human animals aren't part of it. But we were no longer talking about the past and the influence of the past and the fear or the impending future. And we were right there in the present as human animals.
Thank you so much for that answer. And I'd love to take a moment to just read a comment from the chat from Alistair. Alistair writes, this presentation makes me think of the mobile-like and the multi-interdisciplinary uniqueness of Tamaas that allows people's planets to rotate in new ways around and with one another. And they write that, they're so grateful to be part of this community, that it's a call to expand, explore, and preserve relationships, which feels so apt, especially given everything Omar said about a trust in the relational power of friendship. It's truly beautiful. I'm going to be a little bit greedy and ask the next question myself. I'm so curious. I would love if you could talk more about the translation seminars. I have a good friend who is a poet and who writes and works a lot on climate crisis in the Bahamas, where he is from, and everything they're dealing with is a small island nation, kind of disproportionately bearing the brunt of climate change. And he, recently posed the question of, how does language have to transform in the world of poetry, arts, and letters in order to radically transform the climate situation, the political situation? Really the question of, what new words can we build to save us all? So I'm wondering, I have a suspicion that translation has a role to play as something that allows us to connect and understand each other more deeply across cultures. But my question is, what do you feel, I guess my question is, what do you feel is the role of these small organizations in this kind of political moment?
you want to speak to that?
Yeah, it's a great question and really difficult. I don't think I can really answer it in any kind of comprehensive way. Just as someone who is like so totally devoted to poetry and translation, and also so deeply skeptical of the ability of poetry to have effective changes on our like material lives and on the environment and the crises that we're in. So, I mean, I guess one thing I can say is that I find that the kind of work that we do in the translation seminar in the like 2 years that I've been actively part of it, is that like sort of similarly to what Sarah was saying about the sort of need to be in presence with each other for the podcast because it's a live conversation. Similarly with the translation seminar, where that kind of work can be really solitary and even alienating. The work of being a poet and the work of doing translation can be such quiet work. And the way that that seminar brings everyone into the present in whatever is kind of at the center of their work at that moment feels really critical, so that whatever is happening in our like sociopolitical circumstances is in the room with us, or in the virtual space as well. And so, yeah, I think what I'm saying is that there's something about just being together in time, doing that work and bringing, and like that there's space for all of the struggle that is like shared to be there with us as we're working. Feels like it makes it alive and responsive to the moment rather than being something that could ever be separate. Yeah, it's hard to respond to the question in any really specific way, but that's kind of where I go with it. Do you have anything else you want to add, Sarah or Safaa?
Yeah, I mean, I think I understand. I really appreciate what the Brooklyn Rail is doing. I mean, this sort of daily delving into the interstices where conversations and kind of deepenings can happen. And I really think the work can't be underestimated. I think it isn't necessarily heard in 5 seconds, but it has a rippling effect, and the kind of relationships that occur in these spaces help move whole conversations that particular nation states are having. And I think that it's exciting for Tamaas to be working in different cultures. We hosted the Tangier 8 poets and filmmakers. In part, what we try to work with Tamaas is when there are hierarchies to level the playing fields. And so, translators are usually considered less important than poets. And so we have only poet translators. So you don't get to be considered lesser. And as a poet, many of the poets are being asked for the first time to translate something that they've never embarked on. So that's kind of an exciting thing. And with putting film and poetry together, film having such a more powerful reach monetarily and in terms of numbers of people watching. What we did was we put Super 8 cameras in the hands of the filmmakers. So this kind of older technology that would be hard to do even now today, because it's very hard to find any place that would develop Super 8 film. But the idea that, to put constraints on the filmmakers and let the poets go wild. And so that was a very exciting project. And then one of our far-reaching projects in the sense that major institutions like the Tate Modern and the Cinepoem Museum, welcomed us in, and we showed the films and had conversations, and there was craving for more. It went to the Berlin Film Festival. So I think, these impulses, which are about kind of undermining power structures, are really, yeah, as I say, have a ripple effect.
Oh, I love that so much. Thank you so much for that answer and for tackling that with us. For my final question, for our final question, we'll go to our very own Nick Bennett. Nick, take it away.
I want to thank you all so much for this wonderful conversation today. And usually we have our publisher, Fong, ask the final question or comment, but unfortunately he's in another meeting and he wanted me to share his love with you all. But I am curious, you know, firstly, I kind of want to thank you, Sarah, for that. And likewise say the work that you are all doing is so inspiring. And my curiosity as individuals, as writers and editors and various other capacities yourselves, I'm curious what grounds your personal practices, and if related or if resonant, if something comes to mind, if you have a particular word of advice to young writers or editors out there. And I'm curious, maybe if I could pass this off first to Safaa. But it's open to everyone, even Omar, if you have anything to share.
So you want me to give advice?
Advice, or if there's anything, you know, that grounds your practice or something you'd like to share with us, you know, what helps you as a writer, as an editor.
Okay, well, as a writer, because I'm not an editor, so let's see. Let me think, because I never thought of it. So let me think with you. The first thing, perhaps I would say is that every one of us has an inner voice, which is incredibly unique and untranslatable. Speaking about translation, it's untranslatable. And that inner voice, which is untranslatable, sometimes gets mixed up with other noises and other voices and other sonorous impacts, you know, coming from the outside. And I think the first thing one should do, or one has to be incredibly meditative and calm about, is to listen to that inner voice. The first thing, I think, it's like not to listen to it because sometimes it doesn't speak, but or doesn't have sound, but to go and dig for it and find it. And I find that's like, you know, the first thing to do with inscription in general is to get there, to the sometimes in a very, very, very deep stratus of your psyche or your being, or your soul. It is called soul because I prefer soul to anything else. Inside the soul, to find that inner voice, and the inner voice then needs translation into a language. And there comes, you know, the art, the art. So the art comes from what? From learning, of course, from reading, from listening, from sometimes imitating. Mimesis is not a bad thing because, you know, there you integrate a simulation of another world, because we are similar and we are very different. So, you know, once you get to the difference, if you know your difference, then you can go to the similarity, you can go to the mimesis, you can go to be like someone else. The inspiration, sometimes we call it. Somebody will sign, you know, there are intimate people in the plethora of your own context of writing and inscription. Also, there is a thing to do with honesty. So one has to be honest, incredibly honest, because once you know, this is, you know, sometimes the voices, you know, get really mixed up, but you know, I feel like I sound really incredibly, you know, preaching or something.
Not at all. This is wonderful. Thank you.
you know, just like to be honest in the sense that, you know, you're not well, also depends, you know, what type of writing and what type of art you want to do. But this honesty, this kind of pure, honest relationship with the matter, the sense, you know, the meaning you're producing, or you were trying to produce, is primordial. It's important. It's really, really important, because you cannot fake things. And when you fake them, you know, you at least you be aware that you're faking them. You know, so this is something I would think it's. And you know, also believe, like now we've been talking about that earlier, is that the belief that you are instituting sense, you are starting a sense, you're starting something, and you know, try to. We live in a nihilistic world. You know, nihilism is all over the place. So if we within that nihilism, you can try to give meaning to some kind of utopian idea, like, you know, culture should meet and we could speak to each other, and we create spaces, and we create spaces of peace, and we create spaces of concord and harmony, and so, you know, we are all aiming at that kind of utopia, which, you know, probably perhaps never existed in the world before, but, you know, we're getting there. You know, we're trying to get it, even if it's a dream or unrealizable sphere, world, universe.
Thank you. That's great. And
Wow,
Alisha,
beautiful.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, Safaa, I don't think that what you were saying came off as preaching at all. I mean, I'm just appreciating how I feel like what you were saying was like a direct transmission from your own lived practice and experience. And that's, I think, the best kind of advice, is you're speaking from what you've actually lived and known in yourself.
Yeah, of course, you know, yeah.
Yeah, I'm aware that we're getting close to time, and Sarah's going to close us out with a reading. So I think the only thing that I would maybe add to that is something that I'm just like learning all the time, is how much I think that I need to work out through thinking, that I actually need to work out through my body, and how much I've found my writing to benefit from just attending to what my body needs first, and letting the writing kind of come second to that. So that's the advice that I need to give myself every day. You want to say anything, Sarah? Do you want to just go into?
I have a letter poem to Safaa that I wanted to read. That starts my new book, The Nerve Epistle, which has been written to many of the people in this room today. And some of them have responded, like Alistair Julian, Cole Swensen, Jeremy Robert, and I believe there's a poem to Norma. So July 15th, 2017. This was the day after one of our translation seminars. Dear Safaa, I saw the wind reach through your ears again, and you made a huge smile in words, flashing through your teeth. It was the unseasoned hour of breathing fish, and our gills were choked with massacre, the rain along the avenues coming out red. We were getting younger in our palms, turned and curled in through these mornings or night hours. It was said so, fleeting and winded. You in the sun for a second, having to come out blue, and the verdant decorations, all we could think of subtly to that mark. Some kind of wound held together by separation, never to know the end of it, transitioning back to the inner thoughts made up of dominoes and concrete leaves. Several thousand people had fit into that square, thinking it was a circle of souls. The bodies separated out, and we were left with maps and archives, some branches and ancient intuitions. These lines weave through yours, and the thinking goes around far into where we will be. I want to read a poem to Etel Adnan. I see that Cole has a couple of Etel's pieces behind her. Yeah. So Etel unfortunately can't make it to the Guggenheim to her visionary show, but I know she appreciates us all who are sending her the good waves. Dear Etel, those thoughts circle back. We had heard through the ocean, the creatures in troubled waters, we creatures turning about, merely muse and a wonder for the cavity. In there, a coffee running alongside some questions. And you answered in green. You always answer in colors, the torrential thoughts in a window or a cloud. And then I wanted to read, there's a series of poems in this book with colons, which are about relationality. To the Moroccan artist and Hassan Darsi, he works with groups of people and often has installations in real space and time. And his amazing organization, La Source du Lion. Dear Hassan, the tremor of hills, resistance, the toxicity of orange, fierce, the arrangement of metal, precise, the biodegradability of us, mortal, the casting of manners, loud, the sustainability of affection, strong, the encounter of trains, crossed, the quirk of knowing, told, the corporeality of skin, irreplaceable, the quickness of purchase, here, the creation of loss, historical, the nerve of thought, red, the fort of building, character, the sweat of Google, screened, the hollow of horizon, dug, the surrender of nothing, humanoid, the lip of delivery, landslide, the time of ending, capitalism, the question of being, yes, the gold of armor, something, the freeze of feeling, determined, the melancholy of Phil, there, the solution of green, today.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for reading those beautiful poems. A beautiful reminder that Etel Adnan loves us all. And what beautiful letters that you write to everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you, Safaa. Thank you, Alisha. Thank you, of course, Cole, for bringing us all together into this space. And to everyone here today in the Zoom, in the audience, and in the chat, thank you all for being here. As always, we'll share the video of this reading on this conversation on our archives, as well as on YouTube. So it'll be available in a few days if you wish to revisit this magical space. And we do this every day here at the Rail. So please join us again tomorrow with curators Scott Rothkopf and Carlos Basualdo, with Rail Consulting Editor Richard Schiff, for our conversation on Mind Mirror, Jasper Johns, which is simultaneously on view at the Whitney and Philadelphia Museum of Art through February 13th of next year. We'll conclude that event with a poetry reading by our very own Cole Swensen, who's writing on the exhibition herself, and that will be at the very special time of 3 p.m. Eastern, right here in the Zoom. Other than that, thank you all so much. This has been truly a special time, and I'll invite you to turn on your microphones if you'd like to say hello to one another or goodbye on your way out or anything else that compels you. But thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, everyone. That was just so inspiring and uplifting. Really
Thank you, Cole.
good stuff to have.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Cole. Thanks, Safa.
Safa,
Thank
such a
you.
Alicia,
beautiful
thanks,
note.
Sarah.
That was great.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Sarah.
everyone.
Thanks, Cole.
It's so good to see so many faces. Anna, haven't seen you in ages.
No.
Rachel.
Good to be here.
Thanks for
Good to
joining.
see you,
Thanks,
Alicia.
Omar.
Thank you
Thanks,
all.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Safa, what you said about inner voice and getting mixed up with the noise, I think hit us all so deeply.
Thank you
And
so
it
much.
was so meaningful to us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for that. Thanks, Safa. Thank you,
Have a beautiful
Tamaas.
lunch,
Thank you, everyone at Tamaas.
Yeah. And thanks
Thank
to
you.
Brooklyn Rail. Give to the Brooklyn Rail.
And Tamaas. To both. Thank you all. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Stay
Encourage
safe.
everyone.
Hi, Susan. Good to see you.
Hi, Susan.
Great to hear everybody today. It was really wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Yeah, big kiss to everyone. Bye.
Good to see you, Gaza.
Oh, nice to see
See
you.
you.
Bye, Gazelle.
Bye.
Hi, Sarah.